Hello guys, welcome back to our anime explainer. Guys, please like the video and subscribe to my channel. Today is explanation of Tales of Herding God Part 177 based on novel. So let's start. This is the Yang Qi of Yin Yang 2 Qi. They had been refined by the owner of this corpse into divine vitality to protect his body. Qin Mu put away the huge cauldron and the broken leg, while the dragon Qilin stared forward carefully. He asked with curiosity, "Cult Master, what damaged the pot?" "The divine treasures of this god." Qin Mu grabbed a handful of yellow sand and gently blew it forward. Once the particles got claws, something that couldn't normally be seen with the naked eye happened. Inside the body of the huge god's skeleton, which had collapsed in the sand, there were 7 complete divine treasures. They were originally invisible to the naked eye, but once the sand came close, divine lights of all colors were instantly shown, lighting up the divine treasures. The god's corpse was large, but the divine treasures were not. The spirit embryo divine treasure, at the heart of the god's skeleton's brows, was only the size of a square inch. The 5 elements divine treasure was only slightly bigger. The 6 directions divine treasure was located at the dantian, while the 7 stars divine treasure was located between the head, heart, and lungs. Celestial being divine treasure was on the backbone, and life and death divine treasure were below the waist. As for divine bridge divine treasure, it would fly out from the spirit embryo divine treasure to transform into a flying bridge, stretching out of the head. These divine treasure weren't huge, but it was strange how if one looked closer, there seemed to be the space of millions of miles there. It was extremely vast. Qin Mu could even see a withered sun, moon, and stars, as well as broken Milky Way and constellations. In the center of spirit embryo divine treasure, there was the spirit embryo of the god. It should have been part of the primordial spirit, but the soul of the skeleton had long departed. However, the spirit embryo hadn't yet withered. He died from injuries to the primordial spirit. Formation markings swirled in Qin Mu's eyes as he focused his gaze on the spirit embryo divine treasure. The god's spirit embryo had been stabbed through the chest. The sword even left a phantom behind, which showed just how terrifying the strike had been. The broken sun and moon orbited around the spirit embryo, and bright rays of light shone down from them. They were the Yin Yang 2 Qi. The thing that had severed one of the huge cauldron's legs was one of the Qi of pure Yang. After he died, his blood and flesh wasted away, but he still managed to preserve his complete divine treasures. The spirit embryo is still here, and the remnants of his divine vitality are still so powerful, cutting apart a cult legacy treasure so easily. Qin Mu muttered to himself irresolutely. An ordinary god couldn't have such abilities after he died. He had once taken a look at the corpse of Shu Xinghua's master, Jade Sovereign, who had been blasted from the sky by sunshot divine treasure. He had forged and died miserably. Even though Jade Sovereign's corpse still carried a dense god's aura, it was no match for the god's skeleton. On top of that, the divine treasures of Jade Sovereign had crumbled after he died. This was a true god, a real god. Qin Mu's expression was solemn as he flipped through his Daotai sack and took out black tortoise bead. He muttered, "Why would a true god die here?" He took out black tortoise bead and borrowed its power to execute a spell to awaken the spirit of the god's skeleton. Bones rattled. The corpse suddenly twitched, and the dragon Qilin jumped in shock. His scales rose, and even his tail trembled. Qin Mu executed 10,000 spirit nature technique, which was best for women to cultivate. His thoughts were too complicated, and he couldn't cultivate it to the extreme. However, he could still barely execute it with black tortoise bead. A huge white skeleton hand slowly rose up from the sand, and the skeleton gradually sat up. Its skull drooped down, it seeming to be observing Qin Mu and the dragon Qilin. Yellow sand flowed down in a waterfall from its eye sockets and mouth. "Fight!" The skeleton stood up and grabbed a tattered flag from the sand dune. He waved it with his jaw opening and closing. The remaining magic power in his divine treasures shook the air, so even though he didn't have flesh and blood, he could still speak in a world-shaking voice. Accepting the imperial edict. Behind is our homeland, so we have no way to retreat anymore. Fight. We can only fight. Qin Mu's mouth fell open, and he scratched his head. The spirit he summoned should have been a new spirit, but from the looks of it, a part of the skeleton's consciousness seemed to have lain dormant within it and had been awakened by 10,000 spirit nature technique. The battle has already ended years ago, Senior. Qin Mu shouted out. Where's your hometown? Why have you died here? On whose order were you fighting for? Who is your enemy? The skeleton lowered his head to look at him, and his voice shook. As subordinates of High Emperor, High Official of Fomalhaut, we have received the order to block this place. Junior, where are you from? This is a battlefield, quickly fall back. Where are my brothers? The god skeleton swung the huge flag and jumped up, rushing up to the high sand dune. He then froze, just standing there. Founding Emperor era. Isn't that something from tens of thousands of years ago? Qin Mu was flabbergasted. He hurriedly rushed after with the chest. When he came to the top of the sand dune, he couldn't help being stunned. Numerous skeletons lined the desert before them. They were strewn across the golden yellow sand. Some huge skeletons couldn't be completely covered and parts of them stuck out from below. Divine weapons were lying all across the desert, along with tattered battle chariots. There were also rushed motley battleships, and metal discs that were 300 yards tall. Qin Mu was stunned. He was before what was once the battlefield of gods and devils. Thousands of them had died, but not one had been buried. What year is this? Beside him, the god lowered his head and asked, Where's High Emperor? Why are my brothers' corpses left to air in the wild? Why weren't these warriors given the due respect after they died? Senior, High Emperor era has long ended and become a legend. Not only High Emperor, even Founding Emperor era ended, Qin Mu said sorrowfully. Did High Emperor also die in battle? The god hung his head down. He seemed to be crying, but no tears fell. He walked toward the battlefield and picked up a white bone. My brother, my comrade in arms, High Emperor era no longer exists, but I can't let you lie here without a place to belong to. Little brother. He turned to look at Qin Mu. Can you awaken these brothers of mine? We will bury ourselves and rest in peace. This? Qin Mu hesitated for a moment. The fact that he managed to awaken the god skeleton's consciousness with the help of black tortoise bead was a mere coincidence. It was because of the consciousness that had remained dormant that the skeleton could talk after awakening and even recover his memories. The other skeletons might not have the consciousness still left in them. Even if he awakened them, they would just be a pile of walking bones. On top of that, awakening the skeleton of a god required an extremely huge amount of magic power. Even with black tortoise bead, Qin Mu might not be able to endure awakening so many god skeletons. With his comprehension of 10,000 spirit nature technique, he could at most summon a sand giant that was no higher than 3 yards. Any higher would be impossible for him. With the black tortoise bead, he could increase his comprehension of all things having spirit and all things having soul and heighten his senses. Yet awakening so many god skeletons at the same time would exhaust him to no end, and it might even be dangerous. The god skeleton looked at him with faint flames in his eye sockets, full of anticipation. It was the anticipation of a warrior from ancient times about to meet his comrade in arms again. This made Qin Mu unable to bear rejecting him. He smiled wide. I can try. He took out black tortoise bead and executed 10,000 spirit nature technique, to use the awakening spell. After a moment, a huge skeleton stood up unsteadily, and the true god couldn't help being elated. He hugged the skeleton of his comrade in arms and burst in laughter and tears. General. The skeleton was muddle-headed and seemed to not have much intelligence. He could only say a single word. But even with just that word, the true god was moved. It was as though he had returned to the time of High Emperor era. The more skeletons Qin Mu had awakened, the paler his face became. There seemed to be countless voices squabbling in his head, which made it hard for him to concentrate. The true god raised the sand with the awakened skeletons, and used the last of his magic power to execute the fire of a true god, smelting the sand. It transformed into boiling lava, before solidifying into huge chunks of rock. The true god constructed their mausoleum, while the various skeletons used the rocks to construct their graves. One by one, they started to take shape. When Qin Mu awakened the last skeleton, he collapsed from exhaustion. On the desert, numerous tall skeletons finished up the last of the mausoleum. They stood upright in front of their own graves and waited for the final words from their general. The true god burned the last bits of his magic power to prop up the tattered flag and looked at the comrades that had died with him. Wind blew at the tattered flag. It fluttered and flapped. It seemed to be reliving the time of blood and sweat. If there's an afterlife. The true god didn't open his mouth, but there was a sound as though metal was colliding against metal and battle drums were beating. If there's an afterlife, let us gather together and fight the heaven and earth once more. His voice reverberated throughout the desert as he shouted to his own soldiers, his comrades in arms. High Emperor will return and bring us to fight with our enemies once more. For now, soldiers, you can rest. General, let's meet again in the afterlife, the skeletons shouted back. The skeletons walked into their own graves and placed their tattered weapons at their sides before lying down. They seemed to be prepared to leap up once more when the bugle horn rang out and rush into another fight. The flames in the true god's eye sockets flickered, and huge stone tablets flew silently across the air, sealing shut the door to the mausoleum. Runes flowed on the four walls, and with the closure of the stone tablets, the formation that was protecting the god mausoleum became complete. Qin Mu let out a sigh of relief and raised his head to look at the skeleton of the true god beside him. Senior, you constructed a mausoleum for them, so why are you not there as well? The tall god's skeleton sat down while holding onto the flag. It stayed straight, same as his back, and they faced together the tall and desolate mausoleum. I'm their general, yet I didn't bring them back home. I don't deserve to have my own grave. The true god sat quietly while the flag fluttered in the wind. I need to protect them and be their tomb guardian. I could see that none of them woke up. It was you who spoke for them. He lowered his head to look at Qin Mu. Thank you. Qin Mu was stunned. I didn't want you to feel like you are the only one left. So The true god raised his head and smiled. Even though it was you, I felt warmth in my heart. I've no more regrets. From his empty eye sockets, two streams of lights flowed out like dragons and flew into Qin Mu's eyes, settling down there. It was the last of Qi of pure yang and Qi of pure yin in his divine treasures. They were a gift to him. Darkness is coming, go there. The skeleton raised his hand and pointed into the distance. Qin Mu turned back and saw the sun setting. It was about to sink into the desert. Senior, what do you mean the darkness is coming? Qin Mu asked. Could the night here also be faced with the invasion of darkness? Senior. The god's skeleton fell silent and didn't speak anymore. It had no more breath left. Its will was silenced and scattered away. What remained was only the skeleton, with a raised arm pointing into the distance. Qin Mu stood up silently and summoned the chest, as well as the dragon Qilin, who was shivering on top of it. Let's go there. The chest followed him in the direction that the true god had pointed. The dragon Qin collected his courage and asked, Cult Master, what did the huge skeleton mean when he said that it was you? My awakening spell couldn't awaken the spirits of the gods who had died in battle. The skeletons I awakened had no consciousness, and could only follow my commands. He could also see this, so he had said that. The dragon Qin was puzzled. But I had heard those skeletons talking and calling him general. They could talk because I spoke through their mouths. I didn't want him to feel lonely and feel that only he was left from High Emperor era. Qin Mu turned back and looked at the god skeleton that was sitting with the battle flag and guarding the mausoleum. He then looked away and said with a calm expression, however, he noticed, though he didn't expose it. Actually, in his heart, there should still be some hope that the ones talking were his comrades and not me. The dragon Qin couldn't understand such feelings, so he just laid down on the chest to sleep while muttering, I'm afraid of these things the most. Back then at Liu family, I had nightmares for a few days. The sky became darker and darker. Qin Mu quickened his footsteps while the sun set in the desert. Darkness flooded over from the west and caught up to them in an instant, drowning them out. Qin Mu was stunned. The world was swallowed by the darkness, just like another great ruins. The only difference was that when in great ruins it was daytime, it was nighttime here. Suddenly, Qin Mu's heart trembled slightly. I understand. I understand the source of the darkness. Slight noises came from the bottom of the chest, and Qin Mu stopped to look under the chest. He saw a youth without both legs hugging onto the leg of the chest. Grandmaster. Qin Mu broke into a smile. I trust you have been well. Pan Gongso's face was ashen as he spat out, Qin brat, this goddamn world is toying with me. Kill me, cut my flesh, just do whatever you want with me. Qin Mu smiled pleasantly. Why would I cut your flesh? Stop fooling around. Killing is much simpler than cutting. A bright light shone in the darkness. It was a divine light that could pass through the darkness. Qin Mu's heart almost leaped out his throat, and he hurriedly jumped onto the chest. His body sank it down, sending it and Pan Gongso who was below into the yellow sand. What are you doing? Pan Gongso cried out in a panic. Shut up. Xing'an's eyes have entered this place. Qin Mu shouted back in a low voice. A beam of light from an eyeball swept past the desert. Not finding anything, it flew forward. Soon, another eyeball flew over, and the two big eyeballs met in the sky. They paused for a moment. Another faint glow then flew quickly from afar, and paused in midair. It was the head of a youth. It had no eyeballs, but the two floating ones soon entered the eye sockets. You guys are close by. The head in the sky suddenly laughed coldly and said, Divine Physician Qin, Grandmaster, you guys stole my chest and want to escape my pursuit. Aren't you underestimating me too much? Suddenly, the yellow sand in the surroundings hardened, and Qin Mu felt it press tighter and tighter around him. He knew that things were bad and immediately executed Overlord Body 3 elixir technique. His vital qi burst forth around his body, transforming into elegant runes that fell into a formation under the sand. Pan Gongso's blood ran cold, and he hissed, You're going to execute a teleportation divine art in such a place. You don't want to live, but I want to. Over here. Xing'an's head, which was in midair, screeched, and his eyes shot out divine lights to sweep over the land. Hum. The place where Qin Mu was suddenly collapsed and became a huge pit. Next, the two divine lights shot into the huge pit and vaporized a huge portion of the yellow sand. Pan Gongso's scalp crawled as he was teleported away with the chest by Qin Mu. He then shouted out, Cult Master Qin, your abilities are lacking. We didn't teleport too far. Shut up, It's fatty dragon that's too heavy. Qin Mu gritted his teeth and executed the teleportation divine art again. The runes shone brightly. Behind, a head was flying over with two beams of light going over the desert, vaporizing everything they passed. Qin Mu executed his teleportation divine arts until he was out of magic power. He then pointed in a direction and said, "Grandmaster, head over there." Pan Gong so hurriedly took over. He brought out small flags from his Daotai sack, which were imprinted with teleportation runes. Once activated, the flags fluttered and covered them. They vanished before the divine lights from Xing'an's eyes could hit them. Pan Gong so had entered Heavenly Devil Cult in one life, and had almost become the Heavenly Devil Cult Master. So he was no stranger to the teleportation divine art of Heavenly Devil Cult. He teleported them over and over again, and his magic power was also exhausted rapidly. Cold sweat broke out on his forehead. Cult Master Qin, I'll be out of magic power soon. Are we there yet? He executed the last of his magic power and moved them once more. When the teleportation formation markings dispersed, light shone brightly in everyone's eyes as they appeared in a city. The walls were stunning, decorated with lanterns and colored banners. The two of them raised their heads to look and couldn't help becoming flabbergasted. On top of the high buildings and towers of the city in darkness, there stood gods that were 300 yards tall. They either had 4 heads and 8 arms, or 3 heads and 6 arms. There was also those with bird heads and those with beast heads. Some of the gods looked like black tortoise, vermilion bird, white tiger, or green dragon. They gave off intense divine light that forced back the darkness. The city was incomparably bustling with people coming to and fro. They looked as though they had suddenly appeared, squeezing past Qin Mu and the big chest while full of smiles. That's not right, this isn't right. This place was clearly a desert, so why is there a city? If there are really that many people here, why would no one have buried the skeletons of those gods? And why are there so many gods here? Qin Mu had a splitting headache, so he suddenly grabbed the hand of a girl passing by him. That girl saw that he didn't look too bad and burst out laughing. "Lecher, what are you grabbing my hand for?" "Good sister, what year is this?" Qin Mu asked with a pale face. The girl smiled and said, "You sure have a way of flirting. The year now is without a doubt High Emperor year 24,000. Today is none other than the 26,000th birthday of High Emperor. The 26,000th birthday of High Emperor." Qin Mu was stunned. The year in which he was born was 20,000 years after the fall of founding emperor era, which had lasted for some 10 to 20,000 years itself. Didn't it then mean that they were 30–40,000 years back in time? One teleportation from Pan Gong so had sent them that many years back. Under the chest, Pan Gong so was also at a loss. An indescribably weird feeling took shape in his heart. He had merely executed his teleportation flags with the last of his magic power before it ran out. So how could he have teleported himself 30–40,000 years back? It had to be a dream. He was about to pinch himself when a sharp pain came from the place where his legs had been cut off, and he couldn't help crying out in pain. Qin Mu pulled out the long sword that he had stabbed into his broken leg and muttered, "It's painful, so this isn't a dream. Could we be experiencing another echo of history? We are currently in another of those things." The girl in front of him had seen him stab the youth with the broken legs under the chest and was angered. "You, how could you bully a handicapped person? What's the point of having good looks if you're like that? Cruel guy." Once she said that, she turned to leave. "Good sister, wait a minute," Qin Mu said in a hurry to stop her. When the girl heard him, she couldn't bear to reject him. She stopped and turned around to see him coming close and raising his hand to cup her face. The girl blushed and squirmed under his touch. "What are you doing?" We just met for the first time, so how can we be so intimate? And you are very weird. You have a weird chest and a huge pig, and you bully even a handicapped person. My father and my brother won't like you. My father is very powerful, and my brother is also very powerful, so they will beat you to death. Don't be like this. Qin Mu was dumbstruck. His mind was blown as though the lightning from heaven had struck his head. It's real. You are a living person, one of flesh and blood. This isn't an echo of history. We have really returned to the past, back to High Emperor era. Is time travel really possible? The girl was puzzled by his words and asked, "What are you saying? What's an echo of history? What past? What's time tra?" Before she could voice all the questions she had, a young couple nestled against each other walked over. The young man of the pair cried out in astonishment, "Chua, this is..." The young girl blushed and said in a low voice, "Brother, I think I have someone I like." Pangong so crawled out from under the chest, planning to bewitch the dragon Qilin into licking the wound on his broken leg, when he was struck by a thunderbolt from the girl's worst. He spat on the ground. Liking him just like this? So what if he's attractive? He's impressive looking but useless. Qin Mu was in a daze. When the young man saw it, he couldn't help shaking his head. He whispered to the young girl called Chua, "This person doesn't look like he has any spirit. There are so many talented youths in the world, so why should you like him?" The girl beside him smiled and said, "Sister, don't listen to your brother, he always likes to introduce those so-called talents, and doesn't care about who you like. That reminds me, how long have you known each other?" The young girl lowered her head and said bashfully, "Only just." The woman covered her mouth with her sleeves, speechless. "Just met and you already like him?" The young man laughed from extreme anger, and gave Qin Mu a dark look. "The daughter of our Bai family should be a hero of the current times. Do you think you are worthy of my sister?" he shouted out. His aura burst forth, and it was truly world-shaking. Bright rays of light shone behind him, and the primordial spirit of a human with a dragon's head and a dragon's tail gradually rose from them. It radiated a heart-gripping aura. Pangong so opened his mouth wide and looked at it in astonishment. True dragon primordial spirit. That's not right. Shouldn't it be green dragon primordial spirit? He isn't of the 4 great spirit bodies. How could it be? He cried out. Qin Mu woke up and also looked at the youth's primordial spirit. His heart trembled as he thought, of course, this world doesn't only have the 4 great spirit bodies, there are also others. The youth stretched out his hand, which mixed with the dragon's claws and shook, to grab Qin Mu. Lightning was twisting around his hand. "Come, let me test your abilities." As his claws moved, the texture of his corporeal body transformed as all kinds of rune markings appearing on it. In a single strike, 100 types of divine art transformations were actually hidden between the moving fingers. His attack belonged to the extremely top-notch corporeal body divine arts. Qin Mu retreated in a hurry and avoided the strike. The youth gently touched his 5 fingers together, and the space next to Qin Mu exploded with claps of thunder, blowing him high up into the sky. The youth leaped up and sprinted straight at Qin Mu. Pangong so raised his head to look upwards in astonishment. This person with the surname Bai is from the dragon race. Otherwise, he couldn't have cultivated the corporeal body divine arts of the dragons to such an exquisite level. He isn't old yet, he has already cultivated to celestial being realm. Were all the people of High Emperor era so powerful? Pangong So was, after all, an old monster that had lived for 10,000 years. He had roamed overseas and met experts of the dragons. He knew how strong they were, and that for a person to cultivate to celestial being realm at such a young age was truly rare. The girl Chua panicked and said in a hurry, Brother, stop hurting him. Beside her, the woman stopped her and said with a smile. Your brother is doing this for your own good, to see if this youth is worthy for you. Once your brother approves of him, your father won't stop you guys. Think, if your father was the one making the move, your little lover here would end up with countless broken bones. Bai Chua came to that realization and smiled. Sister-in-law is still the clever one. However, she had a worried look. Brother is so powerful. What if he hurts him? The woman smiled and said, Don't worry. Your brother has strong cultivation and knows how to act appropriately. He'll use the same cultivation level as your little lover, so he won't hurt him. In the air, Qin Mu sprinted here and there, but the young man's abilities were simply so strong that it was terrifying. With the trembling of his fingers and palm, the corporeal body divine art that burst forth was way stronger than spell divine arts. The range of his attacks was up to 300 yards, and they were also extremely fast, quickly forcing him to open all his divine treasures. Bang, bang, bang. 3 consecutive explosions rang out in his body, and the young man revealed a disappointed expression as he shook his head. 6-direction realm. Your cultivation is too weak. Fine, I'll fight with you on 6-direction realm, and see how's your aptitude and comprehension. He sealed his celestial being divine's treasure, and his 7 stars divine treasure. The primordial spirit behind him instantly vanished, but even so, his battle power was astonishing. The transformations between his fingers and palm were unpredictable as he attacked Qin Mu. Pan Gongso watched it unfold with astonishment. This young man of Bai family has extremely great talent, and his corporeal body divine art is above mine. When fighting on the same realm, I wouldn't be able to win. However, isn't that rascal Qin on 7 stars realm? As he thought that, a world-shaking explosion rang out in mid-air, and the young man, with the surname Bai, was blown away by Qin Mu like a shooting star. A stream of light streaked across the sky above the majestic city. The 2 girls below were stunned. However, Pan Gongso looked as if he found it natural and thought resentfully, Qin brat, that rascal is on 7 stars realm, and I'm also on 7 stars realm. If I took a punch from him head-on, even my bones would break, yet you genius faced it with 6 directions realm. See how tragic you are now. The young man came back at an even faster speed, and shouted angrily, 6 directions realm can't have such strong magic power and corporeal body. You are definitely on 7 stars realm, so I'll fight you on 7 stars realm. Boom. The young man was sent flying once more, and a god that was standing upright on a building stretched out his hand to catch him. With a smile, he said, young city lord Qingfu was blown back again. Have you met your match? The young man by Qingfu laughed from anger, as he flew away from the palm, and rushed toward Qin Mu. So what if your magic power is vigorous? See my divine arts. He sprinted all the way back, and his fist skill transformed unpredictably, as he attacked Qin Mu with a sky full of dragon claws. Gale and thunder came pouncing on Qin Mu's face, and his clothes fluttered. There was a sense of something fierce about to pounce on him. He immediately threw aside his distracting thoughts, and executed Overlord Body 3 Elixir technique. His eyes lit up, and he couldn't help becoming excited. How are the paths, skills, and divine arts of High Emperor era compared to the later generations? Let's see the result once and for all. Tempest of the 9 Dragons. The 2 of them clashed, and ripples instantly spread out. The dragon-shaped streams of air flowed in all directions at great speed. Ang! Suddenly, dragon-shaped energy burst forth in all directions, and 10,000 dragons roared. The dragon energy scattered around in the air and fought one another. The 2 stepped on the dragons and passed by the majestic gods in the city. Those gods watched while smiling at their fight, exclaiming endlessly in admiration. In the city below, countless passers-by stopped to raise their heads to see what was happening. There were also quite a number of people who flew into the sky to get a better look. A god smiled and said, "The rest of you go down, don't disturb them. Let me light them up and let you guys see more clearly." Once he said that, his eyes shone, and two thick pillars of light shone onto Qin Mu and Bai Qingfu. Suddenly, another god walked over. His features were might, and his eyes were those of a dragon, mighty and extraordinary. City Lord Bai, most of the gods greeted. That god waved his hand and looked at Qin Mu. This youth is very remarkable, though his methods are from Buddhism. However, how is his magic power that vigorous? His technique also has the aura of my dragon race. Weird, truly weird, he said with astonishment. Bai Qingfu fought for a long period of time, but couldn't gain any advantage. Cross swords with spirit weapons, he then shouted out. Dragon-shaped vital chi flew out, with a dragon bead swirling inside it. Countless sharp swords instantly flew out of the dragon bead and attacked Qin Mu like dragons. The youth had held a portion of his magic power back, as his intention was to see the paths, skills, and divine arts of High Emperor era. Because of that, he hadn't used his full strength. However, Bai Qingfu's dragon swords were abnormally sharp, so he had no choice but to execute his full power. Even though his sword skills are exquisite, there are only 14 basic sword skills. He hasn't jumped out of the marvel of the 14 basic sword skills. Qin Mu took a glance and saw the real situation of Bai Qingfu. He smacked his Dao Tai sack, and his sword pellet flew out. He caught it, and 8,000 swords flowed out from the gap between his fingers like flowing sand. In mid-air, sword skills clashed, and Bai Qingfu grunted. He suffered over 100 sword wounds and fell from the sky. Qin Mu straightened a finger, and countless flying swords flew back, gathering together in the air above his finger. They then transformed back into a spinning sword pellet. Superb sword skill. Cheers erupted from the surroundings, and Qin Mu looked around to see 100 gods gathered around. Their majestic figures flickered against the contrast of the night sky. Astonished, Qin Mu greeted his surroundings. A loud laugh rang out as a middle-aged man took wide steps in the air as though he was walking on flat ground. He came right to Qin Mu, who was forced to raise his head to look up at him. Truly a young talent. The middle-aged man laughed loudly. Whose disciple are you? Your abilities are truly impressive, and you seem to be cultivating the abilities of my dragon race. Qin Mu's thoughts ran through many options before he hurriedly said, I'm Qin Mu and I came to this place by accident. I have received a dragon's nest with some writings of the dragon race, so I have cultivated techniques of the dragon race. Bai Qingfu flew over and praised him sincerely. Truly superb abilities. You could stand out as brilliant even in the celestial heavens. Old brother Qin, this is my father, Bai Yuting, the city lord of this 100 Prosperities city. Qin Mu immediately greeted him. Suddenly, the sound of battle drums came from the darkness outside. Bai Yuting's expression became grim, and he said solemnly, It's from Fomalhaut. The extraterritorial devils are invading again. Leave 4 men to guard the 4 gates, while the rest follow me to face the enemy. He led all the gods into the distance. Qin Mu was slightly stunned. Fomalhaut. Wasn't that God's skeleton that I awakened the high official of Fomalhaut? He looked in the direction where Bai Yuting and the rest had left and saw countless bright lanterns coming from the darkness, forming a silver line. It was Fomalhaut, a divine city in the sky. Ever since the sky turned dark, evil devils frequently invade, but there's no need to bother, Bai Qingfu said. Old brother Qin's sword skills are even superior to my fist skills. I wonder if you can teach me. Qin Mu smiled at him. I have some dragon writings that I don't understand and would like brother Bai to teach me as well. When they landed on the ground, Pan Gongtso's expression changed slightly when he heard what they were saying. He immediately shook his head at Qin Mu and transmitted his voice to him anxiously. Be careful of changing history, or we might not be able to get back. This video will end here.